Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. I gotta eat some crow today, folks. I gotta eat some crow today. I gotta do it. Of course, all of today's show is going to be all about Game 1, 2022 NBA Finals. Last night, Celtics-Warriors. Boston wins Game 1 by a final score of 120-108. I got a lot to say about just the game. Obviously, the crazy fourth quarter where Boston, outscores Golden State 40-16 to win the basketball game by 12, as well as Steph Curry, Jayson Tatum. Both, to me, are absolute. Obviously, everybody knows Steph is, but I think Tatum can make that case. He's a top 10 player in the NBA. Last night, folks, showed there is a massive gap between those two. It's not because Steph played well and Tatum didn't. It's for something completely different that I'll get to in just a second. As well as, I'm going to mention a coach who didn't make the playoffs, who to me is relevant today. These NBA Finals, last night in particular, I think even these playoffs in particular, is, in my view, another bad look for a guy who some people claim is the greatest coach of all time, Gregg Popovich. I laugh at that notion. I'll discuss that in just a second, or later in the show, I should say. Al Horford as well, probably the best Celtic last night, he along with Jaylen Brown. And let's just stop it right now. Al Horford's a Hall of Famer. I'm not just talking about last night. Al Horford's a Hall of Famer. I'll discuss that at the end of the show. Of course, I will predict Game 2, which tips off about 40 hours, so about 50 hours from now in the Bay Area at the Chase Center for Game 2 of the Finals. I'll predict that in just a second at the end of the show. But first, let's react to Game 1. So it was a frenetic pace in the first quarter. Boston, I felt like, would benefit from having played just 4 days prior in Game 7 against Miami, and I felt like Golden State would get off to a rough start considering they hadn't played in a week. And at halftime, Boston's up 2, and I'm like, man, I'm thrilled with this, especially considering in the first quarter, Steph Curry goes berserk with 21. He breaks, a quarter into the final. Steph Curry already breaks the record. Most threes hit in the first quarter of a final, not just in the first, of any quarter of a finals game. And I tweeted right after the first quarter, I said, Steph's going to break his own record for threes made in a finals game. He broke that record in 2018 with 9. He finished with only 7. But Steph got up to a ridiculous start in the first quarter. My guy, shout out Across the Pond Sports, James Scott. He says, what happened to the Warriors in Game 1? Was it just a blip? Well, I'll explain that, James, and to everybody out there. So you get, obviously, the third quarter. And I tweeted, I said, this is the Warriors quarter. This is where these guys make the big bucks. This is where they literally change the outcome of games. And Boston has not been a very good third quarter team in these playoffs. And so I said, advantage Warriors here. And, of course, what happened? They blitz Boston in the third quarter. They lead by as many as 15. They go into the fourth quarter up by a score of 92-80. And, of course, the Boston Celtics outscore the Warriors 40-16 in the fourth quarter to win the basketball game by 12. They trailed by 12, and they won the game by 12. Really, it was 40-13. My guy, Nemanja Bjelica, hit a three-pointer with about 20 seconds left. Obviously, did not change the outcome of the game whatsoever. And so you have that aspect to it. Boston wins by 12. So here's what, there's a lot of things that we can break down. Let's talk about that fourth quarter and answer James' question. The question I think we're all asking right now, what happened? Well, here's part of what happened. First of all, and I love Steve Kerr. I thought Steve Kerr coached a rough basketball game last night for a number of reasons. Number one, I get that he wants to keep Steph Curry in his normal minutes. Steph, for those of you that maybe don't, watch as many Warriors games as I do, just because I'm a Warriors fan, Steph, normally how his minutes go, he plays the entire first quarter, rests for the first 6 minutes of the second, then plays the rest of the first half. He plays the entire third quarter, and Steve Kerr puts him in with about 6-7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Obviously, if it's a blowout, he's not going to put Steph in, but that's usually how it goes. So basically, in minute spurts, it goes 12-6, 12-6. And I think where Steve Kerr really messed up, and we could say hindsight's 20/20, that's fair. But Steph is the hottest player in the world in the first quarter. Again, he's got 21 after 12 minutes of play, and he doesn't come in until about 6.5 left in the first half. Loses his rhythm. What do we know about shooters? It's all about rhythm. If you get into rhythm early, you build the confidence early, usually it will carry you late. Well, Steph got out of his rhythm sitting on the bench. And so I think Steph's going to have to play higher minutes in this series. In part, and this isn't on Steve Kerr, Jordan Poole was awful last night. And this is, this is sort of the evolution of being a young player in this NBA, especially your first playoff run with a team that's trying to win a championship. He's still developing, right? Jordan Poole has not hit his peak yet. And so you got last night where he scores 9 points, took him 7 shots to get there. And I felt like the game flipped, especially in the fourth quarter, when Jordan Poole was guarding Jaylen Brown, which was a horrible matchup for the Warriors. What do we know about Jaylen Brown? If I'm not mistaken, I think he's second in the playoffs, in scoring in the fourth quarter to Steph Curry. So Jaylen Brown has been great in the fourth quarter for these Celtics, and of all the guys that Golden State could put on him, they go with maybe their worst defender, Jordan Poole. And Brown just went at him over and over, step back three, driving the basket, right? Getting other guys involved. And of course, Boston keeps cutting in that lead. Even Golden State's making shots here. Wiggins and Steph, they're making shots. But Boston's hitting their threes while Golden State's hitting twos. And of course, they go on talking about Boston, they go on a 17-0 run. Al Horford hit 6 threes. Derek White was fantastic. Here's where I got nervous as a Warriors fan. I think the score at this point was like 103-100. It's about 6-7 minutes left. And they kicked it out to Derek White, far left wing, and Steph is all over him, and Derek White drains a three right in Steph's face to tie the game. And I'm like, oh, bleep, this game is flipped. And of course, it did flip. And so I think now if you're a Boston fan, you're thrilled today. I mean, you should be, right? You got the home court advantage now. You had to win a road game, at least one road game, in order to win the championship. Mission accomplished, right? You took the first game at the Chase Center, a building where the Warriors had not lost a game all postseason long until last night. You go into that building, big fourth quarter comeback, win the basketball game with your best player, Jayson Tatum, going 3 for 17. Yes, he had 13 assists, but it was like a Russell Westbrook 13 assist type of game where he's just, last second passes and guys are making shots. Pritchard's making shots. White's making shots. Smart, right? So that's kind of how it worked for the Celtics in terms of Jayson Tatum racking up those assist numbers. So if you're Boston, you're like, Jaylen Brown's been great the whole playoffs, and he was great again. We just won in a building where no other team had won in these playoffs until last night, all with our best player giving us virtually nothing. All with Robert Williams, and I'll give Steve Kerr credit here, all with Robert Williams basically being a liability on the floor with this Golden State lineup. Because I said last night on the show ahead of game one, I said Golden State could possibly take Robert Williams out of the series by going small. Why is that? Because he has to go to the three-point line. And something that I think we're going to see different, not to spoil my prediction for game two, but something that's going to be a little different that's going to be, I think, advantage Boston. This is coming from a Warriors fan. Where Robert Williams really became the ultimate liability was in the pick and roll. Because you would have Draymond Green come up, set a pick on Steph. Okay, he seals off Smart. Now it's Steph and Robert Williams. And Robert Williams is playing drop coverage on the greatest shooter who ever lived. That doesn't work, okay? I've watched this guy for way too many years to know that is the worst possible defensive strategy to try and stop Steph Curry. I've seen the Clippers do it. I've seen the Blazers do it. Oklahoma City in the past. It does not work. Cleveland did it before. You got to get up on Steph and make him a driver. Now, Steph, since he's put on more muscle these past couple of years, has become a better driver to the basket. So that's something I think that we're going to see. It's very different. I think Golden State is going to make Robert Williams maybe not necessarily unplayable, but he's not going to get the same kind of minutes. He's not going to be as valuable to the Celtics in this series as he was in the last one against Miami, or even before that against Milwaukee. So I could see that being a big, big factor moving forward. But something else that I want to bring up about the Warriors and Steve Kerr. Look, it was great to see him on the floor last night, but just please.
I want Iguodala.
Get him off the floor. Please. Yes, he only played 12 minutes. He hit that three at the end of the third quarter. Iguodala was a liability. And here's something that, we talked about. I talked about Robert Williams can't play big minutes in the series if Boston keeps using the defensive strategy they're using on Steph. Here's something Steve Kerr can't do that he used to be able to do in the past, not anymore. He cannot play Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala with Steph Curry on the court at the same time. Because Boston is just going to load up on Steph, and whoever else is on the floor, whether it's Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, who, by the way, gave you 20 last night. Andrew Wiggins was really the one guy to come along for the ride with Steph Curry. And they're going to give Draymond and Iguodala dare shots. They're going to say, if we lose the NBA Finals because Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green turned into Reggie Miller and Ray Allen, okay, we're going to throw our hands in the air. We're going to shake Golden State's hand and say, heck of a series. See y'all next year. So that's another strategy I think that's going to work in Boston's favor if Steve Kerr keeps employing it or deploying using the strategy. So overall, excellent effort by Boston. There's no question about it. And they absolutely deserve to win the basketball game. I mean, when you shoot 51% from three, when Steph is going on this tear in the first quarter, I don't think Golden State ever led by more than 7. Because Boston, Marcus Smart making threes. Jaylen Brown's hit a couple threes, right? These guys coming off the bench. Peyton Pritchard hitting threes. Derek White. So that's why this is so much of an exciting matchup, is because these teams really mirror each other. Both are great defensively. Both move the ball very well. They're not, completely reliant on one player. Well coached. And if last night continues throughout the series, looks like home court isn't going to be that important. So, congrats to the Celtics. They stole home court in this series. And I got to say, Game 2 is a must-win for my Warriors. This comes from a guy who picked the Warriors in 5, and I didn't pick the Warriors in 5 because I'm like, oh, they're just so much better than Boston. I have a ton of respect for Boston. They're the best team out of the East this season. They absolutely deserve to be here in the finals. But the one thing that I worried about with the Celtics that actually was the opposite last night is, man, their fourth quarter execution, close games, has been really bad in the fourth quarter. Last night, it could not have been better, obviously. You score 40 in the fourth quarter. I think they had like 26 in the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. So they were on pace for like a 50-point quarter, right? So that's sometimes it goes that way. But as my guy Klay Thompson said after the game,
it's first to 4, not first to 1.
That's it. That's got to be the mindset going into game 2. So Golden State's going to come in more of a sense of urgency. I think guys like Klay, Jordan Poole will step up. By the way, Otto Porter coming off injury. I've been the biggest Otto Porter fan these playoffs. He's been great off the bench. Went 4 for 5 from 3. He actually hit his first 4 threes. I think, I'm hearing a lot of Warriors fans say play Otto Porter Jr. more minutes. And I would love to see him play more minutes. The only thing is that foot. Otto Porter Jr. has had foot injuries his whole career. So, and Steve Kerr's acknowledged that. He said, we've kind of had him on a little bit of a minutes restriction all season. And he dealt with the foot injury. He missed game 6 against Memphis. He missed game 5 against Dallas. So you're going to need him to win the series. You're going to need him come off the bench. And I want to see Gary Payton II on the floor. Geez, I was shocked he didn't play last night. He did dress. I'd much rather him been out in Jaylen Brown more than Jordan Poole. Love Jordan Poole, but I do not want him on Jaylen Brown. He's probably the worst defender on the Warriors. And to credit the Boston Celtics, they realized that, and they went right at Jordan Poole. Right at him. So, that was a an interesting feel-out game to say the least on both sides. And that's, if you're Boston, you say, okay, our best player was awful. Our role players on the road, we talk about the others. Shaquille O'Neal calls them the others. The role player guys, usually they don't step up on the road. Boston's did. And to credit the Celtics, Boston's role players have been doing that all postseason. At Milwaukee, at Miami. They did it at Golden State last night. Now, can they continue it? Maybe so. But as a Warriors fan, and for the rest of Dub Nation, the comfort that we can have is we had a really, really, really bad 6-minute stretch. And it came at the worst possible time, obviously, in the fourth. But as Draymond Green said after the game, outplayed him for 42 minutes. So just keep that going. It came down to a matter of execution. It came down to a matter of lack of communication on the defensive end of the floor. And today, I'm sure they've already practiced today, tomorrow, that's going to be the number one thing that the Warriors talk about, is being able to communicate defensively. How many wide open threes did Al Horford get last night? Like those 2 threes he hit in the fourth quarter to put the Celtics up by 3 and then up by 6, both were wide open, and they, because of a lack of communication. So that's what it came down to. John says awful, and he was on the show yesterday. Shout out to John Rivera. He says Golden State in 5. I'll back off. I'm here to tell you, I'm backing off. Golden State ain't winning 5 games. They're not beating this team 4 straight times. Okay, I'm backing off. But am I backing off on the Warriors to win the series? No. Now, if they lose game 2, I'm going to come in on Monday in panic mode. Okay, I'm going to be nervous. I'm not going to lie. Going to Boston, but then again, Boston's not a very good home team in these playoffs. But I've always felt like going into the series, the game I felt most confident in the Celtics winning was game 3. So if that comes to fruition, then Golden State absolutely has to win game 2. Otherwise, if you lose game 2, then you lose game 3. And I could say this as a Warriors fan, they ain't coming back from down 3-0. No team's ever done it in history. I can't say I see this Warriors team, great as they are, the champions that I think that they will be, they can't come back from down 3-0. Because again, no team in history has ever done it. Because if you're bad enough to go down 3-0, it's hard to flip the switch and be great enough to come back from that same deficit. So, game 2 will be fun without a doubt. As it stands today, both teams are fairly healthy, so no major injuries last night. Golden State it's funny. And I think Vegas recognizes the Warriors' sense of urgency coming into game 2, realizing they got to get this one. Have to. Because last night, Golden State's a 3.5-point favorite. They lose in the fashion they did, and they're a 4-point favorite in game 2. Vegas recognizes Golden State, the championship medal, we talk about that, strength in numbers, great home team. Can't screw this one up. You got to win game 2 at home. Got to win game 2 at home. John says, need Poole bad to play good. Poole was, like I said, he was awful last night on both ends. And the thing about Jordan Poole is this. Jordan Poole obviously is not a good individual defender. Jaylen Brown exposed that last night. Other guys have exposed that. Luka didn't like Luka. Took Jordan Poole's lunch money in the defensive end of the floor in the Western Conference Finals. So I think with Jordan Poole coming back, I'm not coming back. I think with these role players coming back, what you want is Jordan Poole playing good team defense, right? Obviously, Golden State likes to play the 3-2 zone a lot. Steve Kerr likes to use that. It's been very effective. It was great against Memphis in the second round. Speaking of Memphis, and John says they're winning game 2. I assume he's talking about the Warriors. I think most people feel like they're winning game 2, and for good reason. Because Boston's got nothing to lose in game 2. They're going to play as loose as ever. So that's sort of the danger of playing the Celtics in game 2. But the one thing that I completely dismissed about this series, I had all the respect in the world for Boston. If you want to talk about talent, if you want to argue the Celtics have a more talented team than the Warriors, as a proud member of Dub Nation, I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm not. There's a reason Boston's in the finals. I said all year the Eastern Conference was better than the West. I've said that since January. But the one thing I always dismissed was, oh, Boston's bigger than Golden State. I said that's not going to matter for two reasons. One, Golden State is going to take Robert Williams out of the series by going small, which they did in game one. And number two, Golden State played a much bigger Memphis Grizzlies team the second round. Memphis led the NBA in rebounding, and Golden State out-rebounded them in 5 of the 6 games in that series. Kevon Looney was magnificent in that series. Last night, you look at the rebounding stats, dead even. As a matter of fact, Golden State had more offensive rebounds than the Celtics did. So I don't think size is especially certainly in today's NBA, I don't think size is near as important as it used to be, or that people are giving it credit for being. So, but what a crazy game one last night. Crazy. But let me move on. We're going to stick with game one, and I'll predict game two at the end of the show. But this is going to be a game one centered show, obviously, considering the things that occurred last night. Let me shift now to the two best players in the series, Steph Curry and Jayson Tatum. We all agree on that. Obviously, everybody knows Steph is a top 10 player. I think not only is he a top 5 player, but I said it with a championship, I put him at number 1 over Giannis, considering the playoff run he's been on. But I've made the argument since about the second round, Jayson Tatum's in the top 10. Outplayed KD. He didn't outplay Giannis, but he went toe-to-toe with Giannis in the second round and won the Eastern Conference MVP over Jimmy Butler. Had outside of one game, had a pretty good Eastern Conference Finals. You know, has led the Celtics in 3 pretty tough series to get to this point. But, and I said, like I said, you know, I did my top 10 players in the NBA coming into the playoffs. You know, I think I had like Giannis 1, Steph 2, was it KD 3, Embiid 4, LeBron 5, and I think I had like Luka 6. That's going to change, obviously, given the playoffs. I said I'm going to do a top 10 list once the playoffs conclude. Tatum, I would probably today put around 8 or 9, maybe even 10, like right around that area, like just in the top 10, but definitely in there. The gap, folks, between Steph Curry and Jayson Tatum is bigger than I thought. And it's not because, oh, Steph went crazy and Tatum had a bad offensive night. It's not because of that. Great players have bad games. Great players tend to obviously have great games, which Steph did. But what I noticed, and what will be kind of concerning if I'm a Celtics fan, the moment at times, and we saw this in Game 7 against Miami, the moment seemed to be just a little, not much, just a little too big for Jayson Tatum. Now, you could point to, well, it's experience. This is Steph's 6 finals. True. But we've seen plenty of guys in their first finals dominate a series. Talking about guys like Kobe, Michael, Magic. You know, let's never expect a rookie to play like Magic did in the finals in 1980 against the 76ers. That's never going to be done again. Think about guys like Kareem. Think about guys like, I mean, even last year, Giannis in his first ever NBA Finals averaged 35 and 13 with 5 blocks. Are you kidding me? You're not necessarily expecting that from Tatum. But it was the tentative, hesitant, lack of aggressiveness that would be a little concerning to me if I'm a Celtics fan. I mean, you saw Steph. Steph is, I mean, that is the most aggressive I've seen Steph these whole playoffs. And Steph's had a great playoff run. I believe he's the leading scorer in the fourth quarter in the playoffs. He's shooting almost 50, 40, 90. So he's been incredibly efficient when it's time for the game to be decided. And he was efficient last night. He went, 50% from 3, 7 for 14. I believe he went 12 for 25 from the field and dropped 34. He was great. But again, it was the hesitancy from Jayson Tatum. It was almost moment is too big. The moment was not too big for Jaylen. I mean, Jaylen Brown scored double digits in the fourth quarter. He started the Celtics comeback. And Al Horford and Derek White finished it. So, and you think about Derek White, Al Horford. The moment wasn't too big for them. This was Al Horford's first finals game. Matter of fact, every single player in the Boston Celtics, this was their first finals game. Obviously, everybody's playing different roles. But Jaylen Brown's the co-star. He's the number 2. He's the Robin. And Robin looked like Batman last night. It looks like Robin wanted to be Batman. And it looks like Batman, Jayson Tatum wanted to be Bruce Wayne. Steph's out here wanting to be Superman, right? So like that's, it felt like that's what we saw. And John, he said on the show yesterday, he commented right here. He said, I told you, you saw what I was saying last night, being a passive aggressive, shaking my head. And that's the thing about Tatum. And like John talked about, I thought he hit it perfectly last night. John talked about in game 7 against Miami this past Sunday, how when Miami is making that comeback, they're giving the ball to Tatum, and he's like, no. Here you go, Marcus Smart. Here you go, Jaylen Brown. Make something happen. I don't want any part of this. So if we get some tight finals games, if game 2 is 107 with a minute and a half to go, do you feel comfortable if you're a Warriors fan with the ball in number 30's hands, or if you're a Celtics fan with the ball in number 0's hands? Because if I'm a Warriors fan, I feel great. I'm chilling, man. I know 30 got it all under control. You're a little scared about that if you're a Boston Celtics fan today. So again, it's not the match. It's the gap between Steph and Tatum isn't. Steph played great last night and Tatum was bad. It happens. Steph's probably gonna have an off game in this series. They had the great players always do. But it felt like, and I hate using this terminology because it almost goes to an athlete's character. And when you get to the finals, when you get to being an elite basketball player, like Jayson Tatum obviously is, when you've accomplished what he has, got to remember, folks, he was first team All-NBA. He was the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. But you almost question, does he want the moment? He wore in game 7, he wore the Kobe Bryant armband, the purple armband that had 24 in gold to honor his mentor, Kobe Bryant. Kobe would have saw red meat in that game last night, considering the looks they were throwing at Tatum. I'm just saying, now we're not expecting Tatum to be as great as Kobe. Kobe's one of the 5 best basketball players to ever do it in my mind. But if you're going to sort of take on that legacy, you better be able to back it up. But something else, though, sort of sticking with Tatum and especially Steph. I'm hearing a lot of folks today talk about, Steph choked in the fourth quarter. And I saw that, was it Skip Bayless that said he gives Steph a letter grade of F? Like, what game were you watching? Steph was the only reason Golden State was in that. If Steph doesn't explode like he does in that first quarter, Boston's up double digits after the first, and they probably blow Golden State out. I mean, you got to remember, Boston arrested Kevin Durant, right? They cuffed him, and then they drove him, and they locked him behind bars. I mean, they shut down KD. They made it really tough on Giannis. Jimmy Butler had 2 horrendous games against the Celtics because they're the number 1 defense in basketball. And Steph just torched him for 34, shot 50% from the field and from 3. Leading scorer by 14 points on the Warriors. I mean, if you're going to blame anybody offensively for Golden State, I don't want Draymond taking 12 shots. Klay's got to be better. I think Klay, what did he give you, 15? Was it 15 that Klay Thompson scored? Yeah, 15 points, 6 for 14, 3 for 7 from three-point range. And Klay's been up and down, obviously. We know he's still not quite Klay Thompson. I would assume he would be next season because now he gets a full off season to, really not have to worry about rehabbing an injury and really just working on his game. But that's the thing. I mean, again, I thought Wiggins had a good night. I thought Wiggins was really good defensively on Jaylen Brown. So I would almost, if I'm Steve Kerr, think about matching Wiggins' minutes with Brown's minutes. Like, look at Ime Udoka. I talked about Steph's because I'm a Warriors fan. I watch every game. I know what Steph's minutes routine is. I don't watch every Celtics game. I don't know what Jaylen Brown's is. So, if somebody could relay that to Steve Kerr and say, okay, Wiggins is going to match that. Does it mess with Wiggins offensively? There's a possibility of that. What I do know is I don't want Jordan Poole on Jaylen Brown. Please. I cannot see that in game 2 in the fourth quarter, or I'm scared. I'm scared about a 2-0 deficit. I do not want to see that. I don't want to sound like I'm being too hard on Jordan Poole. He's in his 3rd year. I thought he should have been the most improved player this year, but geez. And again, part of it is blame on Coach Kerr. And don't play Iguodala 12 minutes. Please. Get 5 minutes and that's it. Play a 1 5-minute spurt, and that's all I want to see Andre Iguodala for. He's still not himself, which is understandable considering he hasn't played in 2 months. All right. Sticking with the Celtics, but moving to, without a question, a future Hall of Fame head coach in this league, a man by the name of Gregg Popovich, who this season became the all-time wins leader for head coaches in NBA history. He passed the great Don Nelson, who, by the way, was with the Warriors his final season when he broke that record. Gregg Popovich broke that record. I think it was a game in January against the Utah Jazz. I remember watching that game because Popovich was on the verge of the record. All-time great coach. Nobody's questioning that. But the only thing that I have always questioned about Gregg Popovich is not that, oh, he can't win without Tim Duncan. Well, yeah, no, Tim Duncan's the greatest power forward ever. It's hard to win when he's gone. Belichick isn't winning without Brady. But I think Belichick and Popovich share a very similar bad trait, and it's costing them right now. Now, I never thought I'd be talking about the San Antonio Spurs, who didn't even make the play. Or yes, I'm sorry, they made the play-in tournament, but they were the 10 seed and lost to New Orleans. San Antonio is a shell of themselves from what we remember of their dynastic years with Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, and the other cast of characters that have helped them along that run to winning 5 championships. But Popovich, Belichick share the same bad trait. They had an all-time great player. With Pop, it was Tim Duncan. With Belichick, it was Tom Brady. And they thought they were bigger. The system was bigger than the player. Now, Brady's departure from New England, Duncan's departure from San Antonio, vastly different. Duncan retired in his own terms. Brady was pretty much kicked out the back door by Bill Belichick and by, reportedly, a lot of the Patriots coaching staff who were like, man, Tom's not the same. And, he almost won the MVP last year. He's still Tom Brady. We know about their exits. Brady, Duncan, vastly different. But sort of the, I guess, is you quote unquote getting fat off your success, resting on your Hall of Fame laurels, where you have Bill Belichick who's letting players like J.C. Jackson, who's a top 5 corner in the league, just walk. He trades Chandler Jones, one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. He lets these excellent, elite in some cases, players just walk out the back door. They flourish in other destinations. Derek White. Gregg Popovich trades Derek White. He was in the doghouse with Popovich. He didn't even play at times this year under Gregg Popovich. He gets traded to the Boston Celtics. They do not win that game last night without him. I have raved about Derek White these whole playoffs. I've said, as great as a defensive guard as Marcus Smart is, he's so great he won Defensive Player of the Year. We know what he can do at that end. I don't think Derek White's that far behind. That dude gets up in you. What are we going to give him, 6'3"? He's not a small guard. He's not a small point guard, rather. He's sturdy, he's physical, he's quick, and he's a really good shot maker. Just look at Game 6 against Miami. I know Boston lost that game because Jimmy Butler, scored 47. Derek White was phenomenal. I think he had like 24 points or something in that Game 6. And then you look at last night, and Derek White gives you 21 on 5 for 8 from 3. I told y'all, the moment where I was like, uh-oh, as a Warriors fan, was when Boston's down 3 with about 7 minutes left in the basketball game, and he hits that contested 3 over Steph. I'm like, oh boy, this game just flipped. He's been the X factor for these Celtics. That's why, even in the games Marcus Smart has missed, Derek White's been huge. So what I question is at this stage in his career, can Gregg Popovich get the best out of his players? At this stage of his career, does Gregg Popovich think the system is bigger than the player? Because you know who's last in the NBA again? Second straight year in three-point attempts? You guessed it, the San Antonio Spurs. Steph Curry changed the game. Everybody's got to shoot threes. You got to be a good three-point shooting team. Boston can shoot it. Obviously, Golden State can shoot it. Dallas lived and died by the three. In the last round against Golden State, they died by it. But they got to the Western Conference Finals living by the three with Dinwiddie, at times Luka. Definitely guys like Bertans, that corner three. Lethal, 40%. How about that? Bertans, another guy who's left the Spurs and has been great with the Wizards and now with the Mavericks. Kyle Anderson, who's been excellent with Memphis, had his career best season, not with the greatest coach ever, Gregg Popovich, but with the Memphis Grizzlies. So that's the only thing I question about Pop at this point. And John points out his former assistant coach with the Spurs talking about Ime Udoka. I will give Pop this. His coaching tree is really good. I talked about in the Memphis Grizzlies. What's his name? Taylor Jenkins. Guys like Ime Udoka with the Boston Celtics. The Popovich disciples have been really good, just like the Steve Kerr disciples have succeeded. Well, I thought Willie Green did a great job with the New Orleans Pelicans. But it's sort of this mindset of letting really solid NBA players go, and they excel in other destinations more than they succeed in San Antonio. Gregg Popovich, rather than maybe trying to convince Kawhi Leonard to stay in San Antonio, basically said, for lack of a better term, screw him. We're just going to ship him off to Toronto, and Kawhi goes and wins a championship, and the Spurs haven't won a playoff series since Kawhi left. They've been to the playoffs, I think, once since Kawhi left, or got traded, rather. There's a reason Kawhi wanted out of San Antonio. He didn't trust the medical staff, didn't trust Popovich. So that's one thing I question when people talk about, he's the greatest coach of all time. Personally, this is going to sound, very like, oh, well, obviously, all the championships, but Phil Jackson, you talk about, well, of course you're going to win championships with Michael Jordan. Previous coaches didn't win with Michael Jordan. Same with Kobe Bryant. Yeah, of course, everybody could win with Kobe and Shaq, could they? Dealing with if you read about the stuff that Kobe and Shaq dealt with internally, with the Lakers dealt with internally with those two superstars, it'd blow your mind. It'd blow your mind. There'd be at times they could not look at each other without, going at it. Phil Jackson, not only, up until the end, kept that internal, again, up until the end when it became public, but basically, sort of mended the bridge, when it came to playing the game of basketball. And Kobe and Shaq are still, to this day, the last team to three-peat. I'm trying to think of the Chicago Bulls. I always forget the guy's name. Hold on. Doug Collins. Yes, I always forget Doug Collins' name. Doug Collins, I think, was an excellent NBA head coach. He couldn't get the best out of Michael Jordan. Now, Jordan's best scoring years came under Doug Collins. Why is that? Because he made Jordan the focal point of the offense. Not that Phil didn't, but it was Jordan or bust. Once the triangle system comes in with Phil Jackson, making Michael more of a willing passer, trusting his teammates, trusting the shooters that they had, trusting the big guys that they had. Same thing in Los Angeles. Kobe's greatest scoring years were when they traded Shaq and, Phil, left for, briefly. Phil comes back. Obviously, they got Pau Gasol. Triangle offense is back. Boom. Now, Phil's gone off the rails lately. I don't know what's going on with Phil Jackson. He's talking about, the Lakers need to trade LeBron. Like, man, you lost your mind. LeBron's the only guy I even trust at this point with the Lakers. Like Phil's in, we know the horrible job he did running the New York Knicks. Horrible. But in terms of coaching, give me Phil Jackson any day of the week over Gregg Popovich. Absolutely. Guys didn't leave the Bulls and get better. Guys didn't leave the Lakers and get better. Guys have left the Spurs, and they've been better. I mean, Popovich looked at Kawhi as just okay, you're a defensive stopper and, go score 30 a game. Like that was just normal. It's guys like that don't come around very often. Like that's a short list. That's Michael Jordan. That's Giannis. That's Hakeem. Guys that can do that on both ends. Nah. Kawhi Leonards don't just grow on trees. And the Spurs had to find that out the hard way. But I will say, man, Derek White, unbelievable last night. Again, they don't win that game without him. Let's transition now to the other guy that they don't win last night without, Al Horford. Now, Al Horford has been, we all know, the ultimate professional, the ultimate class guy. He's obviously, the guy doesn't even curse during games. Like, I saw him one game in the playoffs drop an F-bomb. I was like, wow, Al Horford dropped an F-bomb. He's very cool, calm, collected. That's why when he went off in that game 4 against the Bucks in the second round, it was like, man, he's flexing. It's like, wow, Al Horford's showing him emotion. Like he's the ultimate, show up to work, do your job. That's who Al Horford has always been throughout the duration of his career. And that's who he's been at the Celtics. But I've heard a lot of folks saying with a title, if the Celtics win the title, Al Horford's a Hall of Famer. And I disagree with that. I think he's a Hall of Famer now. Boston wins, Boston loses. Al Horford's a Hall of Famer. Because here's what you got to realize. The Basketball Hall of Fame is not like the NFL. The NFL, it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's just the NFL. College has its own Hall of Fame. Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, New York. It's, it's college, men's and women's. It's the NBA. It's the WNBA. It's everybody. So with Al Horford, you're taking his college career and his NBA career. And by the way, playing for Team USA also counts on your resume. So when they look at, somebody like Andre Iguodala, some might say, well, is he a Hall of Famer? Yes, he was huge. He's obviously got a Finals MVP. Yes, he played a huge role for one of the greatest dynasties ever. I think the thing that puts Andre Iguodala over the top, he's got a gold medal. Gold medal, Finals MVP, 3, maybe even 4 championships. That puts Andre Iguodala in the Hall of Fame. By the way, he was really good at Arizona in college. But Al Horford was great at, it makes me want to puke saying the name of this college, the University of Florida. Okay, I held the vomit in there. But Al Horford won, not 1, 2 national championships in 2006 and 2007 at Florida. If you think about basketball players that have won 2 national championships, that is a very short list. Like, that's a list that the greats of the greats, men's and women's, have been on. You're talking about guys like Bill Russell, Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Bill Walton, Candace Parker, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's a pretty elite list. That's elite company to be in. Of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won 3 straight titles. I think from, was it 67 to 69 with UCLA? I know it's 3 straight, but I think it was from 1967 to 1969, back when I don't think they'd let Kareem dunk. At the time, I think dunking wasn't allowed in college basketball. Al Horford's on that list. Al Horford led the Florida Gators, coached by a guy I really like, Billy Donovan, to 2 national titles. And so, and something else too. We talk about, he wasn't like a perennial all-star. We never looked at him as at a time in Atlanta, he was a star. One year he averaged almost 20 a game. He's a star. But Was he really ever a superstar? No, he wasn't. I would argue there's some superstars who didn't even make it as many All-Star games as Al Horford. These are all-time greats that haven't made as many All-Star games as Al Horford. Alonzo Mourning, who up until Dwayne Wade was the greatest Miami Heat player ever, Jamal Wilkes, Chris Mullin, Pistol Pete, and Dennis Rodman. All of those guys have less All-Star appearances than Al Horford. And something else, and I think this factors. I'm weird this way, and I do this a lot in the NFL. And this doesn't just apply to sports, but I think to just life and society in general. You don't ever truly know how valuable somebody is to something or someone until they're not a part of it anymore. Al Horford left the Atlanta Hawks in 2016. Yeah, 2016 to go to the Boston Celtics. Al Horford was a part of the only, I believe it was the only 60-win team in Hawks history. Remember that team in 2015? Obviously got swept by the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals because LeBron owns the Hawks like he owns the Raptors, like he owns the Celtics, like he owns the Pacers, like he owns everybody in the East. But that's another story for another day. But Al Horford leaves Atlanta. Atlanta hasn't sniffed 60 wins since then. He goes to Boston. He's a part of a big culture change there. Obviously, when Al Horford joins the Celtics, Jayson Tatum hadn't even been drafted yet. Jaylen Brown was a rookie, and Marcus Smart was in his second year. So sort of the core three guys that everybody talks about the Celtics were either babies in the league or, in the case of Tatum, not even in the league yet. So Al Horford was a big part of that sort of culture change, and to me was the second best player on the Celtics when they almost got to the finals in 2018 against the Cavs. Obviously, Tatum was the best. I thought as great as Scary Terry Rozier was, I thought Al Horford on both ends of the floor was more valuable. By the way, Al Horford, 3 all defensive team selections. So he's great in the defensive end. I'm sorry, I think he's a Hall of Famer. And by the way, he leaves Boston. Now, I'd say a lot of that is the Kyrie Irving fiasco that would ensue the following year. But Boston never really got back to that same defensive team that they were. Obviously, they bring Ime Udoka in, who helps change the culture on that end of the floor. But Al Horford was a big part of that too. Bringing him in. With Al Horford, what they can do now, if you take Robert Williams off the floor, I talked about this yesterday, it's a big advantage for the Celtics. Even if Golden State basically makes Robert Williams irrelevant in this series, Al Horford's 6'10", he can play the 5 easily. He's played the 5 for most of his career. If he has to play the 4, he can do that. But if Golden State wants to go small and put Al Horford at the 5, he can guard the perimeter. And obviously, last night, Jaylen Brown was the best Celtic last night, but Al Horford, again, they don't win that basketball game without him. Guy goes 9 for 12 from the field, 75%. And then 6 for 8 from 3, also 75%, for 26 points. So you think about his impact on both ends of the floor. Defensively, I thought he was great. I thought he did a great job communicating anytime Golden State wanted to run those pick and rolls for Steph, for Jordan Poole. Al Horford was huge. No question about it. And I'm sorry, he's a Hall of Famer in my book. Let's not be like the baseball Hall of Fame where we let guys who never got arrested, who didn't throw a crayon at a kid in second grade, the equivalent of steroids pretty much, and just exclude half the great players of the modern era from the Hall of Fame. Okay, let's not be like baseball. Baseball is the worst possible mold for the Hall of Fame, and I don't want to get into a Hall of Fame rant today for Major League Baseball. I don't want to do that today. I already did that for Barry Bonds a couple months ago. I'll probably do it again next year. I don't want to talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame. But Al Horford's a Hall of Famer. College, NBA, everywhere he goes, he wins. And he's been to some teams that don't exactly have a winning culture. Atlanta, we've always thought Atlanta's fun. Good watch. They're not boring. They're not the San Antonio Spurs. They're not a boring team to watch. Atlanta has always seemed to have a fun offensive guard. You think about Joe Johnson. You think about, obviously, now with Trae Young, the great Dominique Wilkins back in the day. He wasn't a guard, obviously, but the great Dominique Wilkins back in the day. Atlanta's always been a fun offensive team to watch. They're really what Atlanta is the Portland Trailblazers of the Eastern Conference in some ways. They can score on you with ease, but they kind of struggle on the defensive end of the floor. Al Horford, for a brief time, changed that. They won 60 games with him. I'm just saying, he's the best player in a 60-win team. But, of course, that got snuffed out by LeBron and the Cavs pretty quickly. All right. Man. Crazy night last night. Game 1 of the finals. Boston wins 120-108 to take a 1-0 lead in the finals over my Golden State Warriors. We're in for a series, folks. We're in for a series, and we are in for a game 2 that, in my view, my Warriors have to win. If, like I said, if the Warriors lose game 2, I'm going to be like shivering in my boots tomorrow. I'm sorry, Monday at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific time, right where you're watching on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. I'm going to be, I don't know how I'm going to do the show that day. I really don't. Because they go down 2-0 going back to Boston. And I had this, before the series even started, I had the Celtics winning game 3. I'm nervous. I'm really nervous. So, without further ado, game 2 of the 2022 NBA Finals. Boston has a 1-0 lead. It will tip off at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific time on ABC. My Warriors are favored -4 at home over Boston to tie this series up. We're going to see, game 2 is going to, well, let me explain it this way. We're going to see in between 2 games, these finals, there's not going to be a bigger difference in schemes than between games 1 and game 2, because game 1, like every finals, like every series, is the feel-out game. Steve Kerr, the mistakes he made with his rotations, is my guy Grady Edwards, shout out to him, was texting me throughout the game last night, talking about, man, these rotations like 3rd, 4th quarter have been really bad by Steve Kerr. I think he's maybe going to shorten it up a little bit. I would anticipate Steph is going to play more minutes. Draymond and Iguodala are not going to play at the same time with Steph. I see Gary Payton getting some minutes guarding either Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum. He can frustrate those two. Not stop them, but certainly, maybe get in their heads a little bit, especially Tatum. I anticipate that Steph, if he gets 34, which Lord knows I'm not discounting, I picked Steph to win Finals MVP, but I feel like it's going to be an inefficient 34. If, let's say, he matches what he gets in game 1, 34 points, it'll be more inefficient. Because I cannot anticipate, I can't, with as good of a defensive coach as Ime Udoka is, as number 1 defensive basketball are the Boston Celtics, I would be really surprised if with the bigs, whether it be Robert Williams, Daniel Tice, and even at times with Al Horford was really the only big that didn't commit to this. But if they go drop coverage, if the big is inside the 3-point line on the pick and roll, which leaves Steph as open as he could possibly be for a 3, and he's, 99 times out of 100 is going to cash that thing in. Nothing but net. So they're going to make Steph work. They're going to basically say, okay, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole beat us. Those guys are going to have to step up. Klay Thompson has a history in these games, in these must-win games. It is not an elimination game. Not even close to that. It's only 1-0. But this has the feel of a game. All the pressure's on Golden State. There is 0% pressure on the Boston Celtics. They did their job. They took a road game from the Warriors. They took home court in this series. They don't have to win a road game from here if they take care of business at home. So this is do or die time for the Golden State Warriors. And when it's all said and done, again, they're favored -4. I wouldn't touch this game. I'm not confident in a bet in this game. I'm not going to play if I were a bet man this go around. But I think when it's all said and done, we're going to get a tight game through about the first 3 quarters or so. And I think Golden State's experience, championship medal, knowledge and realization like, hey, we better wake up or we're going to be in some trouble heading out long flight from San Francisco to Boston. I think Golden State wins game 2, 115-99. Somewhat of a blowout, I guess you could say. But I feel confident in this one, not necessarily the -4, but in my final score, for the simple fact that Tatum is going to show up. Tatum is going to be better than he was in game 1. I'm not expecting like a 30-piece from him. But Boston is not going to hit their first 8 threes to start the fourth quarter. They're not. Al Horford's not hitting 6 threes. Derek White, you would assume, is not going to score 21 off the bench. Now, is it someone different? Is it Grant Williams? Is it Peyton Pritchard? Does he give them what Derek White gave them? Does Grant Williams give them what Al Horford gave them? That's the thing about Boston, is their depth. But I think guys like Otto Porter Jr., guys like that are going to step up. I wouldn't be shocked if Bielitsa gets more minutes. I think he's been really good in these playoffs in the minutes that he has gotten. He was great in the Dallas series. And Boston is not going to be near as efficient from three-point range. Golden State's going to get out and transition off these long rebounds. Boston's going to shoot a ton of threes. And Golden State's going to win game 2 by a final score of 115-99. That is my prediction for game 2 of the NBA Finals. Not gonna lie. My Dubs don't win this one. You might hear some teeth chattering on Monday because I'm going to be nervous. And I will concede. This is not going to be a 5. I really genuinely thought it'd be over in 5. This is not going to be a 5-game series. Not at all. But it's going to be fun. Tell you what, there's a lot going on in sports right now, though. I saw today, can't say I'm stunned by this news, but the Philadelphia Phillies just fired earlier today Joe Girardi after 2.5 years managing the team. I've always liked Girardi. Obviously, he won the 2009 World Series managing the Yankees. I was never a huge Girardi guy. I don't know. I thought everybody talked about his rotations. They were terrible. And I've heard some folks saying, what are you going to do with this rotation? At the end of his tenure in New York, that's what got them beat in a lot of these playoff games. His rotation, the way he used the bullpen was really shaky, depending on the situation, late in the ninth inning, late in these tight games. So I think Girardi's a great broadcaster, though. I've watched him on MLB Network. I think he's done a really good job over there. And I wouldn't be shocked if MLB Network brings him back. But it's possible that this very well might be the end of his managerial career, because I never saw it with him. But most importantly, game 2 of the NBA Finals, again, Sunday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific time on ABC. I got my Warriors winning. They better win to even the series at a game apiece. They said a series in the NBA doesn't start until the road team wins. Well, we got ourselves a series in that case. And I think the Warriors are going to recognize that, execute much better in the fourth quarter than they did in game 1, and win game 2. Also, my Tennessee Vols open up the NCAA men's baseball tournament. The number 1 overall seed, GBO, Go Big Orange, number 1 overall seed, a team that when it's all said and done, if they have to win the College World Series in Omaha, but if they win this thing, given the numbers, given the record, given the talent, you could possibly say might be the greatest team in college baseball history. I'm just saying. Let's go Vols. Let's get it done tonight against Alabama State. So that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Had to eat some crow today, but hey, it happens. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. Really help them in a better mood than I am today. And be sure to catch the Carving Up podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, episode 8. We're coming to the end of this thing, folks. Episode 8 of the Carving Up U.S. President's Edition will be available tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific time. Again, on all podcasting platforms that I just mentioned, as well as YouTube. So be sure to check that out. It's going to be, it's a great series. We're covering all the U.S. presidents. Again, we're coming towards the end. So we're doing these last episode 8 and 9. We're covering the last 8 presidents. So we divided it into 4. So we're going Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, the first Bush, and then finishing off with Bill Clinton. And then next week with the most recent 4 presidents of the United States. All 4, only 4 presidents of my lifetime. So be sure to check out that series as well as the previous other 7 episodes. If you're not caught up, be sure to check that out. So have a great weekend, everybody. Please stay safe out there, y'all. God bless y'all. Peace out. Gotta win game 2. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.